All right, and welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Nerd Kitchen. I am your chef, Craig Stonaha, and with me is our special guest.
I'm Sous Chef Sonya.
It's Sous Chef Sonya. You can't go wrong. A production this elaborate requires multiple hands. Today we are talking about 2FA, two-factor authentication. This is a huge thing that's been coming up with most of our clients lately, not only for security purposes, but also for compliancy. So we want to spend a little time here, take you through it, explain why you need it, how you can get it, and kind of give you the first steps and trying to set up your staff and your organization to take that next step in security. So the first thing we want to talk about is what exactly is 2FA? I'm sure you've probably heard of it by now if it hasn't been from your insurance company or from some sort of compliancy organization. Somebody has brought it up. Essentially, all it is a way to give another layer of security onto your standard username and password. So a good example of how they do this is through text messaging or usually some sort of app like Authy or Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, something like that. Or some will also use email as a secondary authentication. Really, all that's happening here is you put your username and password into a site you would normally use or an application you would normally use. It's going to pop up and say, hey, we need a code. Almost universally, that's how it works. And then you're going to go to whatever method you prefer or have it set up with. You use that code, you drop it in, bang, you're into your application. Now, there are a few instances where it's not code-driven, such as Microsoft Authenticator, where it's actually going to push a notification to your phone, and you have to click on that notification to allow. It's essentially the same thing. It's just instead of using a code, it's using a user interaction to achieve the same results. Now, the real question is, why do we need to do this? And the main reason is that hackers are getting better at breaching usernames and passwords. So we want to give them a little bit more work to do before they can take away all your data. Now, if they get your username and password, if you don't have 2FA, they have full access to whatever they've breached. If you're using 2FA, now they have a secondary thing that they need to hack. Maybe it's they have to breach into your Microsoft Authenticator account, or they have to break into your phone, or have to break into your email account. Whatever it is, it makes things at minimum twice as hard. Caveat, it's only twice as hard if you're using unique usernames and passwords throughout all your logins. So please make sure that you're mixing up your passwords, make sure that you're using some sort of password application. We'll cover that in another episode. Or make sure that you're using some sort of rotational process where you can keep your passwords fresh and different for different sites. The last thing you want to do is have your username be exactly the same thing as what would need to be used to access your secondary authentication. They already have the data. They can just break into that, and now they've got full control even though you're doing all the right things. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but we are also seeing a big move towards 3FA. It is exactly what it sounds like, three-factor authentication. This is just another layer of authentication. So you might log into an application. It's going to ask you to enter a code from your text messages, and after that, it's going to ask you to go ahead and authenticate off an app. It's the same concept, it's just adding yet another layer. Does it work? And this is the big question, and I'm going to give you the short answer is yes. It absolutely does work. It makes things much more difficult for anybody who has a bad idea with your data to break into your stuff. It also provides you with a lot more peace of mind and extra layers of security where you can control what's going on. So if you're getting a push notification saying that somebody's trying to access your Microsoft 365 account, but you haven't been trying to access your Microsoft 365 account, you know you might have an issue, and it's worth looking into. Contact your IT department, talk to your managed service provider, whoever it is that you would trust with your data, and kind of find out, hey, why am I getting this notification? Why is it acting like I'm being breached? So the last thing I want to say before we kind of get into this as an actual example of how to use 2FA is under no circumstances should anybody be asking you for your 2FA code. So if you do get a phone call from someone and they're asking you to share that with them, this is probably a really good sign that this is not a legitimate phone call. Anybody that has access to your account should not need your 2FA, and anybody that wants access to your account will need your 2FA. So make sure that that stays only for you. Nobody should ever ask you for it, and you should never give it out. Compliancy. Now we're going to do a little example here on how to set it up, but I do want to touch on compliancy real quick. 2FA is becoming an absolute mandatory requirement for almost all insurance policy compliancy right now. Now, it has been for HIPAA and for PCI and for some of these other compliancy organizations for a while, but the insurance one is the one that touches every organization. We all need insurance. Cyber policies are pretty much standard now if you're going to be in business in the United States. And almost all insurance carriers are now requiring a security assessment. So if you're not utilizing 2FA, especially on your key access points such as Microsoft 365, Google, VPNs, anything like that, you need to make sure to have a conversation with whoever would be in charge of your organization to find out how you get that implemented, because it will start having real world implications, and very soon if it hasn't already for you. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this. So what we're going to actually do here is we're going to go ahead and walk through an actual 2FA implementation. So if you've never done it before, this is real simple. What we're going to use for this one is my Facebook account, which I have 2FA turned off on right now. We're going to go ahead and set it up. And we're going to use Authy as our app. I like Authy. You may not. That's completely up to you. But if you'll see on your screen right now, we're in my Facebook account. We're just going to go to security and login. And the way we got here was we just clicked on the little picture at the top right and just hit settings. That'll take you into the settings screen. Go to security and login. And you'll see if you scroll down a little bit here, you're going to have two-factor authentication. Now, the process for setting up two-factor authentication is almost universally the same. So what we see here on Facebook is what you're going to see, some variation of this exact same process on almost every single app. We're going to hit edit here. And it's going to take me to this screen saying, how do you want to do it? Now, we could set it up with text messages. We could do a physical security key, which we didn't even get into in this show, but is always an option. Instead, though, we're going to bounce right here to use Authentication app. And it's going to say, boom, we've got ourselves a QR code. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my Authy application. Now, if you've never used Authy before, it's just as simple as go to authy.com and just click download. And when you click download, it's going to take you right to the download screen. You choose your operating system, and Windows 64 is what I'm using here, but whatever you're using. And after you hit download and install it, you will have your Authy screen right here. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to do this part on my cell phone. I'm just going to go ahead and hit add account. I am going to scan that QR code. Boom, scanned it immediately. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this Facebook, the Book of Faces. And it just popped in, and we should see it come in here on this as well. And now when I hit continue, it's going to ask me for my code. I'm going to put my code in right off my Authy app. Continue. And it's that simple. Now it's saying that we are turned on. So now every time I log into Facebook, either from a new device or if my session is timed out on an existing device, it's going to ask me to check my app, enter in my code for Facebook, and that's just going to give me that extra layer of security to know that it is me that's actually doing it. Now, as always happens on the internet, this is not working the way it's supposed to. It did not sync into my desktop app yet. It will. You got to give it some time. So, but let me just click off. There it is. Came in right there. So now you'll see I've got my Facebook here. And if I were to go ahead and do an Authy authentication here, I could just click on this and grab a code and put it in. That's it. It's that easy. As you'll notice, I have a whole bunch of accounts in here. I mostly use Authy for my 2FA. But if you're more comfortable using email or text, whatever works for you is fine as long as you have this set up and you're properly securing your data. That's all I have for today. My sous chef seems to have left me, but my name is Craig Stoneha, and thank you for joining us on the Nerd Kitchen. We'll see you next time.